I'm Sarah Gilcher, and I have a blog, Perennial Joy, and I have an Etsy shop, Perennial Planner. Today I wanted to come on and talk about my transition from public school to homeschool, because I know that with the coronavirus cancellation of schools and kids having to stay home, that a lot of you are probably looking for alternative ways to school your kids and how to kind of complete the year well and not lose momentum with your kids. I know some schools are trying to figure out, maybe all schools are figuring out how they can do some distance learning, and that's great. But this might also be a good chance for you to think through what kind of gaps the public school leaves, or even your private school, and how you could fill those at home during this opportunity to get your kids home with you, and how you can be also their educator and their teacher. Up until this year, we had our kids in public school, and I have a 5th grader and a 2nd grader, and then a pre-K daughter. And so we were in the public school, and we were happy with it so far. We were in Washington State, and we really loved the school district that we were in, and we really loved the teachers that we had and the momentum that the school gave to our kids' education. But we moved down to Texas, and unfortunately it just didn't flow the same way, and it wasn't easy. We went to a semester of school down here, and the days were a full hour longer down here than they were where we were from in Washington. And I found out some reasons for that, but my kids would come home just tired and headachy, and I felt like I hardly got any time with them. And so we opted to try homeschooling for this year, and we've actually really enjoyed it. Next year we plan to send one of our kids back to public school, hopefully a charter school nearby, and then 2 of them will stay home again. So I just wanted to kind of answer some questions as to how you could do some schooling at home for the rest of the school year, maybe continuing into summer, and do it easily and without a lot of expense, and yet how you could really kind of take charge of your kids' education for the rest of this year. So some things that I felt like were not covered well in our public schools in the past that I've been able to work with my girls on are typing. There's a lot of emphasis on technology, but not a lot on typing, and maybe your school's different, but that was just our experience with 3 different schools. So one thing that's really easy is just to get your kids on typing.com each day, or a few days a week, and get them used to doing some typing skills on typing.com. It's fun, it's free, there's different levels, so they're motivated to move along through the levels. Another one is map work. I didn't feel like the public schools did a great job teaching our kids geography and where things are located, and so an easy website that's also free is called Seterra, SETERRA.com, and I'll link these down below. So on Seterra, the kids can learn maps by just clicking, and you can make custom maps and link to them. I usually just pull up a Google Doc, and I put in my kid's name, and then I put a link to the map that they're going to be working on. And they know in the morning, as part of their morning checklist, they just go and they click through from that link, and then they go and work on their maps. Another one that I want my kids to work on that's not taught in public school is handwriting and cursive. And so these are just things that you can work on yourself with your kids if you feel confident with that, or you can buy workbooks to go along with that, or free printables online. There's some free things that are available as well. History is something that's might sound a little more challenging to teach to the kids, but I found it to be a wonderful way to fill the gap that the public school leaves on history, with teaching world history and going way back to the beginning of history, the beginning of time, and to integrate biblical history along with it. And the easiest way that I've found to do that is to listen to the Story of the World audiobooks. We started with the very first one that goes back to the earliest days of Mesopotamia and walking through. My girls have really enjoyed every one of those chapters. We listen in the car when we're on the go. You could put it on at home and let your kids work on the maps or the coloring that comes along with the workbook, and I'll link to those as well. And Jim Weiss is the is the narrator for Story of the World. He's awesome. Your kids will love him. Another thing that has been wonderful to catch up on as a family has been Bible. So we love doing catechisms. There's some great catechisms online, like the New City Catechism. We use one called North Star Catechism by Sojourn. We love to do a Bible read through together. We're in the we just finished the book of Exodus today, actually, and they're loving getting a picture of how the Bible fits together as a story. So we just read a chapter a day when we get our morning circle time, and I'll explain a little more about morning circle time. Proverbs is another easy one to do together with your kids. Just read the proverb that correlates with the day of the month for that day. And if you just keep going through month after month, they're going to become so familiar with these proverbs. And you may already know this, but proverbs were written as wise words for children, for a father to teach to his son or a mother to her daughter. And so what better way to pour wisdom into our children than to read these proverbs? I usually split them into 3 sections and have each of us read one. And then I have my daughters pick out a verse that especially stood out to them, maybe something that didn't make sense, or maybe something that did make sense and is particularly applicable to them. And they really enjoy that. Another thing that we really love doing is hymns. I love it. I don't know if my kids do. I think they do. Right now we've been reading Hymns for a Child's Heart. I'm trying to see my book, Hymns for a Kid's Heart. And it tells the story behind the writer of the hymn, the composer, and then it has the hymn with the music in it. And if we are not familiar with the tune, we can just look it up on Spotify and play it along with our singing. Another awesome resource are the Getty Kids hymnals. Getty puts out kids albums, and you can find those on Spotify, and you can buy hymnals that correlate with them, with all the music and the lyrics in the hymnals. And then your kids learn, the thing I like is the kids learn to follow along hymnal style and read the different verses as they come to them, as the song repeats. Folk songs is another fun thing that schools maybe don't always get to. Sometimes in the music classes they do, but you can choose some unique folk songs from your area or from history. And so we've enjoyed different folk songs. Sometimes they watch mom break down and cry, and as we run into some unexpected heartrending folk song. Same thing with poetry. I love reading poetry with the girls, but sometimes it does choke me up because I should have pre-read and known that it was going to be some heartbreaking tale of, some parent and their child. But it's great to expose the kids to poetry and to hymns and folk songs and these rich things that are sometimes lost in our helter-skelter way of life. Another thing that you might choose to touch on during this time would be great master artists. Do you have any art books laying around the house that have pictures done by great masters? If so, you should pick those up. It's easy to just open the book, show an image to your kids for 1 minute, and close it and say, what did you notice in the picture? And you'll be amazed at what your kids pick up. And then you can discuss some of the techniques of the artist. Usually if you have an art book on hand, it'll have some information about the artist and about the image, and your kids will really look forward to that time and enjoy that. And later, after everything's open again, you can go and take them to a museum, and they'll have that much more appreciation because they've already maybe seen that artist, or they've noticed different painting styles and techniques. And classical music is another great thing to listen to right now. Maybe finding a composer that you can focus on for a few months and listening to their music periodically. It doesn't have to be all the time, but maybe just in the background, and recognizing what instrument it is. You could read a biography on the artist. You could even just pop up Wikipedia and read about the artist together as a family. Nature studies is another great thing to do this time of year, the springtime. Go out on nature walks, notice what the trees are doing together, notice what wildflowers are coming out. If you have any nature guides, bring those along. Look at what birds are coming through your area. Kids love that kind of thing. Now I'm talking about, obviously, elementary kids are the age of kids that I have, and that's definitely something that is very interesting to elementary age kids. They love to be outside and digging around in the dirt and figuring out what bugs are out this time of year, and trapping them in jars and watching what they do. Another thing that is really awesome that we have loved doing this year, we've done it for a few years actually, even while we were in the public schools, we would do this after school every day, is reading missionary biographies. My girls and I have found that it's just a hugely impactful way to see how somebody's faith played out in their real life, in their real walk, how they had struggles, and yet how the Lord proved his faithfulness through conversions and through getting these missionaries through really hard times and yet preserving their faith as they went through tough trials and personal trials and trials in their ministry. And I really highly recommend them, because I think that it encourages my children to one day be heroic, just like those missionaries. I don't want them to just be any type of hero. I want them to be a hero in the faith for the Lord, and to do the Lord's work here on earth, and to pursue the Great Commission as their highest priority. Lastly, the thing that I'm going to talk about today is reading to your kids a lot. So lots of read aloud. Obviously, I talked about I talked about the missionary biographies and reading the Bible, but pick a fun read aloud that they would like to hear. Sit at the lunch table and read a chapter a day, or they might beg you to read more. Put audio books on their whatever device they have, and let them sit in color and listen to an audiobook. Or we do it at bedtime, because it's an easy way. It's been an easy way since my kids were young to keep them in their beds. We do limit how many nights they listen to audiobooks, but we find it to be a great way to expand their vocabulary and their imagination. And then we hear them just referring to books in conversation, and I love that. I think that it's great. You can put on classics, you can put on new books, just give them a good mix. When you're reading to them out loud, there are so many websites to recommend great books. I would highly recommend the Read Aloud Revival podcast and the Read Aloud Revival website. She's got so many recommendations of awesome books for all ages. Read to your kids above their level. So this would be not necessarily just for your fun book, but this would be choosing something each day to read to them above their level, with vocabulary they don't quite understand and concepts they don't quite understand. This will expose them to a broad variety of names and vocabulary and ideas that will maybe remain fuzzy right now, but as they start to read more on their own, and as they start to see more of the world, they're going to hear things that are familiar, and it's not going to catch them off guard as being a totally unfamiliar name or word or concept. One example is if you are reading to them and they're being exposed to a vocabulary that is higher than their level, later when they're reading a book on their own, they're going to know how to sound out, how to pronounce that word when they come across it. Whereas if they've never heard that word before, then they're not going to know, and they're just in their own mind going to make up their own pronunciation for it. Two things that we read usually every day that we sit down and do circle time would be Shakespeare and Plutarch. So Plutarch has written the histories, and we just pick one at a time to focus on. I was having my 5th grader read on her own, but I enjoy just reading even just 1 or 2 paragraphs with the girls, and we talk about it afterward. Shakespeare, what we choose to do is we choose to read a story by Charles and Mary Lamb, and then after we read the abridged version, we go ahead and just start reading one scene each day of the actual Shakespeare version. Even if it's over all of our heads, it's still I love it, and it's good for us to pick it apart and understand what we can. And I want to develop a love in my kids for Shakespeare. So the last thing that I'll mention is morning circle time that we do, and that's each day. We do it actually just 3 days a week as part of our homeschool day. We sit down together, and this is all of our favorite time. We sit down together, we start out with Bible time and prayer and singing, and next I pull out the Christian Almanac, which is, again, it's over their heads, but it refers to what happened on this day in history, in Christian history, and in the United States history, and all over the world history, actually. And so it's fun to read through. We don't read through all of it, but we usually read the highlighted event and then pick up some other dates that are interesting to us. And again, this exposes them to the names of presidents, the names of important people in our country, important people in the Christian Reformation and in Christian history. We do a little bit of Bible memorization. We do some Spanish learning, and that's something that if you wanted to jump into, you could look at Pimsleur, is what I really enjoy for learning together. We just listen to it for a few minutes a day and get really repetitive with it. And that way we can get a little bit of language learning in. Duolingo is a free resource that they can do on a tablet or on your phone. We also like to read some U.S. history together. I got a big book from the library and we just plod along. It's got great pictures in it, and we just go through that and read a little bit at a time of U.S. history, because since our main focus is on our story of the world studies, I still do want them to learn about the country that they live in, and actually that is a requirement here in Texas for homeschooling, is good citizenship. So I feel like that I'm staying along with that guideline by reading the U.S. history book every week. We do some science reading. I really recommend the Apologia science curriculum if you're interested. My girls, what they like to do during circle time, I don't let them during Bible time, but the rest of the time I let them draw if they're drawing something from nature. And that's a little loose. I actually let them draw from these 3 books called Nature Anatomy, Farm Anatomy, and Food Anatomy. And these books have great illustrations in them. And my girls love to prop them. We prop them open in a book holder, and they sit and they just draw and draw from these things and listen to our readings. One way to do circle time well is to not try to do everything every day, but just pick a few highlights and then write a list of the other things you'd like to get to and loop through it. Just one day do some history, the next day do some science, the next day do an artist. So just keep it short for starting with, while your kids are getting used to it and while their attention spans are getting used to it, and then move to the next one. So I'll make more videos with more recommendations in the future. I just wanted to give you a little bit to get started. I think you're gonna value this time with your kids, and I think that it's gonna be, in the end, a good thing for a lot of families to kind of play catch up on some things that they may not have gotten time for the rest of the year, and to bond as a family and spend that time reading together and playing board games together and having some outdoor time together. So have a great day, and I'll be praying that we all pursue Christ and love our neighbor during this time that's challenging and scary and out of the ordinary, and that we prize and pursue the Great Commission, making disciples even in this time where we feel really disconnected. In my Etsy shop, Perennial Planner, which I'll link to below, you can find just really inexpensive planners, daily schedules, and an entire homeschool planning package with calendars and all the things that you might want to plan out your homeschooling. And I'm planning to add some more things into there that are even easier for people who are making a transition, who've never done homeschooling before and who just want to start simply. So I'm going to add some of those in, and then I'm keep an eye on my YouTube channel for updates, and I'll just keep bringing in resources that might be helpful for you. Have a great day, and thanks for watching my first ever YouTube video.